This is the UK Financial Intelligence Unit podcast.
Hello and welcome to the UK Financial Intelligence Unit podcast. My name is David Maguire and I'm a senior officer in the UKFIU. In this edition, we're focusing our attention on wildlife crime and how we can potentially identify red flags through suspicious activity reports, or SARs. We'll be discussing a piece of analytical work that the UKFIU did on this topic, and we'll also be chatting with Alan Roberts and Ian Guildford from the National Wildlife Crime Unit. Now, if we use the definition given in the 2020 National Risk Assessment of Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing, then the illegal wildlife trade, IWT, includes the trade in species that are protected and prohibited from all national or international commercial trade. International organisations, including the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, have assessed IWT to be a major transnational organised crime generating billions of criminal proceeds every year. In fact, a FATF report in 2020 highlighted that the criminal proceeds associated with IWT are generated and moving through jurisdictions around the world, including the UK, with criminals exploiting weaknesses in the financial and non-financial sectors. So let's learn a little about how the UK is tackling this criminality. Ian, Alan, welcome to the podcast. So what is the National Wildlife Crime Unit?
So what we do is we are a support agency for police investigations, or mainly police investigations into all forms of wildlife crime. The unit itself is an intelligence unit with an analysis side as well, and the investigative support means that we can actually put proper investigations in place, because it's a very specialist area and most police officers don't actually understand very much about wildlife crime.
In 2021, the UKFIU conducted a strategic assessment of the illegal wildlife trade, which was shared with law enforcement agencies and partners. Many species were listed in the SAR data, and it was felt that it's highly likely that the UK helps fuel the trade of endangered species by buying, selling, and acting as a source and transit destination. So I guess my question is, what kind of illegal wildlife trading are you coming across in the UK?
A source country in relation to a few species which might not hit most people's radars. For instance, eels. The trade in elvers, which is baby eels basically, is a massive trade internationally. And I think Ian can probably speak a bit more clearly on that, because he's the representative for our unit on it.
Yeah, just to add on what Alan's already said, in relation to the European eel, the UK is a source country as opposed to a destination country, so it is one of our priority areas. The European eel is seriously endangered. The numbers have crashed for various reasons, but one of them is the illegal trade in it. The issue is that there is still a high demand for it in China, and any criminality, if there's a demand, there's always a source, the price will go up. Normally you'll find on the riverbank they go for £150 a kilo. It doesn't mean a lot, but within a kilo of glass eels, there's about 3,000 odd eels. So there's a lot of eels in a kilo of glass eels. Prices that are looking at being paid on the black market and illegally goes up to about £6,000. So it's 6,000 euros to be correct. So there's a major trade in that, and the UK is a source country for European eels.
Also, peregrine falcons, and the Middle East trade in peregrine falcons, where they race them or use them for hunting. There's big money in that, where our wild birds are being taken out of Scottish or Welsh hillsides and shipped across, laundered into the captive bred population that are perfectly legitimate, and so they're disguised as these legitimate birds and shipped off for multi-thousands of pounds into the Arab states for falcon racing. So we do have problems with birds and all species going out of the UK.
The UKFIU SARs analysis that I mentioned earlier identified online sales platforms and social media sites being mentioned in SARs to sell species, enabling products to be traded under false names or narratives. Species listed online from the SAR dataset included animal skulls, ivory listed as oxbone, bird species, whale and dolphin bone, and tiger wild cat skins. Is disguising the true nature of the product being sold a common occurrence then?
There is a tendency for people to disguise items. The ivory is the obvious one, but when we do find people that are trading between each other in other media, they don't want to be talking about the thing quite openly, so they will give it a disguised name. And this is quite common, really. They'll give it an initial, say T for tiger or something like that, or even more obscure. A lot of the things that are referred to in conversations on platforms tend to be by the Latin name or the scientific name, because that's the sort of familiar territory that people talk in. They don't necessarily give the whole name. So it's not quite that easy to find some things sometimes. It's not necessarily disguising on that, but certainly it does come into it.
The FATF 2020 report stated that criminals take advantage of the legitimate wildlife trade to commingle licit and illicit proceeds. This must present challenges for detecting illegal activity, especially if laundering the proceeds from wildlife crime generally involves trying to conceal or disguise the source, movement and ownership of those funds. How do you deal with this?
It's very difficult, really. Identifying the criminal side from the legitimate side can be quite a challenge, and a lot of the time we will find out about things that have been moved out of the country after the event. Mentioning ivory, a lot of the trade that we've prosecuted quite a few ivory cases, and a lot of the things that have been identified, we never actually have any knowledge that the thing's being called ivory or is ivory. We just have to assume from the name on the description. But when it comes down to identifying other types of material or other types of goods, a lot of the people that are trading at the serious crime level are also into the legitimate trade as well. They've got a perfectly good business going on. And they will just argue that this is legitimate business. We're making our money from this, and we're not making our money from the criminal side. It's not like drugs. There's quite a legitimate trade in a whole range of species, and so we are, I think, hopefully going to start working more closely with the financial business sector to try and get the SARs more used to us than we have found so far.
One of the issues that Alan touched on earlier was the trade in peregrines, and that's one of the ones that shows the difficulties that we encounter. There is a perfectly legitimate trade within the peregrines and other birds of prey from both in and outside the UK, but the issue comes that wild birds birds are being taken from the wild and laundered into the captive legal market. Basically, they'll take them from the wild, they'll introduce them and claim that they bred the birds. So everything looks as though it is legal, and usually the only way that you can detect that sort of illegality is through maybe DNA parental testing to check whether the birds are related to the alleged parents. Intelligence we work off. There's many ways you can do it, but it's not an easy way, and it is an easy, well, not an easy way, I wouldn't describe it as that, but it is a way of laundering wild animals, illegally taken animals, into a legal market and then trading them legally or appearing to be legal trades in them.
In the UKFIU analysis, SARs were submitted for the majority of species due to reporters' concerns of facilitating money laundering due to individuals having previous adverse media and or having served jail time for these offences, rather than there being current ongoing activity. What can you tell us about the people predominantly behind illegal wildlife trading?
I think, first of all, there's no such thing as a typical wildlife criminal. They could be anything from, rich businessmen to drug dealers, effectively. And, they are, they're a mixture from the avid collector who is determined to get the biggest, the most expensive, the rarest of everything. And that goes right across the whole range of collectors. Although there are, again, there's the vast majority of collectors are perfectly legal, everyday people who don't commit any offences ever in their lives. Whilst those are there will always be people who are willing to or want to break the law to actually get better than everybody else. From that, then there's the organised criminal groups who are just using wildlife as another commodity. There is no typical profile, but obviously the ones that we are most interested in are probably the ones that are more interested in, more involved in the traditional crimes, the ones that are making the most money and having the most impact on wildlife on a global scale. And they do touch in the UK. They are financing or using the financial resources of the UK and actually banking in the UK, some of them.
And how do SARs play a role in your investigations? What do you look for in them?
We rely on those going out to the different forces in the way they would go in relation to any other reports. And then they would be passed on to us as intelligence. So hopefully when we have access directly to obtain the data or the information from the SARs, we should actually make sense of it directly ourselves, and hopefully the addition of a financial investigator will make all the difference to us, and we can start picking up.
Now, it's evident that the illegal wildlife trade is present in SARs. Whilst red flags are useful, such as links to freight or courier services, international payments or references, these links alone are highly unlikely to be enough to implicate an individual in IWT and can account for multiple other activities. So I guess it's a realistic possibility that these payments could be from legitimate business by the subjects rather than anything untoward, despite them having perhaps previous adverse media. Is there anything, in your opinion, that SAR reporters could be looking out for? Anything that could assist in perhaps helping to tackle the illegal wildlife trade?
Yes, I think it is going to be difficult because obviously it relies on a certain amount of knowledge of things like species. But it would be coming down to discrepancies in the values paid for things and such like. For instance, somebody paying well over the odds for something that's described as something common or not worth very much at all, or regular payments that are coming into an individual for something that can't be particularly identified, to make large quantities of money over a period of time. So things like that, or I think we'll have to start inputting into sort of keywords or things like that. So we're very happy to work with people that are in the financial market to actually identify certain areas where things would be as you say, red flags. But it isn't a simple thing, and certainly there will be quite a lot of legitimate trade to disguise it all.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's wildlife crime can be very complicated in many respects, and one of them is identifying actually what is illegal is not illegal. And there's a lot of legal trade going on there, and we've already touched on it, the fact that there is a lot of legal trade which covers the illegal trade. So trying to identify it for someone who hasn't been involved in that arena can be quite hard. Myself and Alan probably just longer than me, but between us we got, I hate to think how many years experience in dealing with wildlife crime. So you see the flags, you see the indicators, but for other people it can be quite hard to actually identify what those indicators, what those flags are, what the trade is. On the face of it, it's a legal trade. It looks perfectly legal, but it might be something that we could see. So I think, I don't know, it's a difficult one to actually say how it can progress, but as Alan says, keywords, etc., can be a great help in this.
Well, that brings us to the end of this podcast. I'd like to thank my panelists, Ian Guildford and Alan Roberts from the National Wildlife Crime Unit, for their participation. Now, it's likely with the increased attention and understanding of IWT that the trade will continue to grow, along with the level of SARs reporting on the trade. If criminals are relying on established methods to launder the proceeds from IWT, including the placement and layering of funds through the formal financial sector, then this shows the important role that reporters can play in detecting suspicious activity. If you'd like to learn more about the work of the National Wildlife Crime Unit and also the UKFIU's analysis of wildlife crime-related SARs, which we touched upon, there are articles on both these in the November 2021 edition of the UKFIU magazine, SARs in Action, which is available from the National Crime Agency website. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to be kept up to date on UKFIU products, including future podcasts and magazines. And please remember to subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform you're listening from so as not to miss out on future editions. So until next time, thank you for listening. I've been David Maguire, and this has been a UKFIU podcast.
This is the UK Financial Intelligence Unit podcast.